Okay, so Benjamin Constant is a guy you've probably never heard of, but you're going to learn about him. And it's a little background. So he's Swiss, he's French Swiss, so he can be Italian, you can be German, right, or French, French-speaking Swiss. Uh, the Liberty of the Ancients is the reading that we've done. It is based on a lecture that Constant gave in 1816. Um, this is why history matters, you guys. When he gives this lecture, it's important to know what he's talking about, what has happened in the previous decades, and what has just happened. So, French Revolution, 1789, 99. What the French Revolution is trying to do is trying to create a form of ancient liberty. And I'll talk more about what that means here in a second. Ancient liberty effectively being what the Greeks had, or what the Romans had. This is basically direct involvement in democratic life, right? Again, now, of course, not everyone. We're talking about 10% of the Greek population, not much more of the Roman population that actually gets to participate. Obviously, slavery, patriarchy, all of that stuff. And it's not to make light of it, but within the kind of definition we're given, right, in that form of liberty, it's a direct engagement and everyone has power, right? That's what the French Revolution is trying to do on some level. Doesn't work. Actually goes pretty badly. And this is something that Constant is really trying to understand is the reign of terror. How did that happen, right? How do you go from a democratic movement to the reign of terror? This is something that does not happen in the American Revolution, because the American Revolution is in some ways, to use that word again, a bourgeois revolution. It's a revolution that, people who were pretty well off were at the forefront of advocating for the revolution because they wanted to be better off. Yes, did poor farmers take part? Yes. Did white yeomen benefit? Absolutely. But it's not a revolution like many revolutions that is actually, driven forward by the poorest of the poor, which the French Revolution does do, right? Again, it's not the poorest of the poor, not the ones sitting negotiating, writing the Declaration of the Rights of Man or forming a new government, but it is the force of the revolution is the poorest of the poor. That's not the case in the American Revolution, right? Actually, the worst off actually get worse off, right? Slaves, enslaved workers, and Native Americans. Napoleon comes to power 1804, 1814. So Constant is trying to figure out what went wrong here and like how can these high-minded ideals go so wrong? And if that's the case, then what do we do, right? What does liberty look like in the modern world, right? Modern 1816, right? Again, American Revolution has happened already, so he's got that as a model. French Revolution happened, kind of wants even more freedom and equality, goes off the rails. In this regard, he disagrees with Rousseau. Rousseau is all about right power to the people, right organic lived democracy. Constant is more conservative in this regard. He's like Edmund Burke or Rush, some of these other English conservative English philosophers that were also kind of terrified about the French Revolution. Constant also disagrees with Mary Wollstonecraft, who, like Rousseau, is a fan of right giving more power to the people. Obviously, kind of proto-feminist. She wants more power for women as well. So what Constant wants is a kind of hybrid. Right? He thinks, yeah, liberal rights are good, but there should also be a constitutional monarchy. Right? You need to have the kind of like he's not Hobbes in any way, but he's saying you gotta kind of have a strong man at the helm, right? So in this way, he's like Frederick the Great, who we've read. He's like whom else am I thinking of? Not Hobbes, but whatever. Frederick the Great. We'll just leave it at that, right? Frederick the Great. Um, okay, so what do we mean when we say the liberty of the ancients versus compared to the liberty of the moderns? Um, And again, think of what Lenin is saying here, because what the Soviet Revolution is trying to do is create a liberty of the ancient model, right? Purportedly, right? Again, goes off the rails like the French Revolution in a different kind of way. Um, Ancient liberty, this is all a constant, right? So this is according to Constant. Ancient liberty is all about citizenship, right? Everyone does their duty, they're engaged, they're all about being citizens, right? They have a small population. It's easier to do because it's easier to kind of look around and have like a fellow feeling, right, with every other citizen, because you might not know them, but you might know someone who knows them. It's a small community, right? It's easier to have those kind of tight-knit feelings of citizenship, duty, obligation in a small community. In a form of modern liberty, it's all about individuality, right? That the role of the state is not to like nurture feelings of citizenship, but to nurture your own feelings of individuality. This is in some ways out of necessity, because with a large population, you can't do the citizenship thing, right? Says Constant. In the ancient form of liberty, the state is more important than the individual, right? That it's you sacrifice for the state, for the good of the state. Part of being a citizen is you're all together, right, holding up this thing that's more important than you, which is the state. This is where a lot of rhetoric and imagery of the early American Republic is very similar to this, right? It's about being, as I said when we talked about Montesquieu, living frugally, living simply, because the idea is what is most important is the democratic republic, right? Holding up that republic. So the American Revolution does this a little bit early on, right? By the time we get to Jackson, right, it's not necessarily, let me get rid of this pop-up that's come up here. It's not necessarily the case anymore. But that's the ancient model. Modern liberty, it's all about the individual being more important than the state. And this is where we get the shift in American rhetoric from citizen to taxpayer, something I've talked about before, right? Taxpayers, that's very individualized. It's totally not a citizen. A citizen, sacrifices. A citizen wants to help other citizens. A taxpayer doesn't. A taxpayer wants to just not help other citizens, keep their money or whatever, right? That is a very individualized understanding of what liberty or rights is. That's modern liberty, says Constant. Oops. In the ancient form of liberty, it's about collective action in the public sphere. Again, colonial America is all about this, right? People going out and, the Boston Tea Party is about collective action in the public sphere. The tarring and feathering of tax collectors, right? The Sons and Daughters of Liberty. This is all a revolutionary spirit that's trying to create an ancient form of liberty. Same thing in the French Revolution, right? People taking up action, storming the Bastille, whatever it is, right? Ancient liberty. Constant says, that's not really sustainable in the modern world. In the modern world, it's all about individual freedoms in the private sphere, right? So the ability to, again, to have low taxes or whatever, the ability to own a house, whatever. These are private sphere things. These are not things that you go out and engage in communal action in the public sphere. It's all about your own individual rights, liberties that you have in the private sphere, right? People not the government not looking in on you and spying on you or whatever. Just like Google and Amazon, that you actually pay money to have spy on you. So there's that, but whatever, right? It's all because you don't want to get up and change the radio station or something, so you have whatever. And I'm sounding like I'm the ancient. I am, in terms of ancient versus modern liberty. I think ancient liberty is, has some benefits. Okay, another one. Direct say from all, right? So this is where ancient liberty, you see where like communist revolutions tap into this idea of ancient liberty, same as the French Revolution. There's a certain anarchist principle here, right? That it's a direct say from everyone. It's not representative government, right? So representative government it's not sustainable. You can't have, right? Even with this recent election, you can't have 140 million people having a say in what they want. So you vote for like one dude, or you vote for like 50, right, or 100 people, or what have you, right? Representative government. And then what are the issues with these two? There are many, but the issue with the ancient form of liberty is there's too much focus on the state, and not enough focus on individual interests. So this is where we get the criticism of someone like, someone who advocates for statist Marxist Leninism. It's all about the proletariat, right? Well, in that focus on this empty signifier of the proletariat, a lot of like individual interests and liberties get destroyed, right? So actually in the effort to create a communist, right, everyone together, no one gets the benefit, right? Because you're too focused on this abstract good of the state, right? We'll read Rousseau when Rousseau talks about the general will. This is another kind of idea here, right? That it's all about the general will. Well, what if that's different from my individual will, right? Then I don't really feel too good about that. That's a problem with the ancient form of liberty. Problem with the modern form of liberty is that there's too much focus on individual desire, right? What you want personally, and that undermines political power, right? It undermines politics when everyone is focused on themselves. And when you're too focused, when the politics gets eroded, what erodes next? Individual liberty and individual rights, right? So it's a slippery slope. You're so focused on your own individual liberty and freedom that you disregard the heavy lifting of the political sphere. And when you disregard the heavy lifting of the political sphere, your individual rights and liberties can easily be disposed of, right? So problems. Ancient liberty has problems. Modern liberty has problems. Lenin tries to figure it out. Mao tried to figure it out. The American Revolution tries to figure it out. And the French Revolution tries to figure this out. So this is an ongoing issue, right, in politics, and it's contemporary too, right? So the idea of the resurgence of socialism or democratic socialism is about wanting to have more focus on citizenship, right? Duty to others, connectivity, right? People being connected and having kind of a communal sense of duty. People who push back against that would say, no, it's all about the individual, the individual, the individual. There's problems potentially and kind of pitfalls on both sides. So hopefully we can have a discussion about what that looks like in our modern theoretical or actual political world. So that is Benjamin Constant.